Okay, welcome to 4844 call number 17. So we didn't have one last week for ETH Denver, so it probably makes sense to spend most of this just sharing any updates, any open questions that people are looking at. There wasn't anything specific added on the agenda. Why do we start the calls at past? Gives me an extra half hour of sleep in the morning, Marius. It's nice.
I have a call that ends right when this starts, so some people have weird time-induced calls.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. On the spec side, I know there's been a lot of talks. It's kind of specs and implementation now about handling decoupled blobs. So that seems like something that's worth going over. And then beyond that, general client updates. But if there's anything else people want to cover, you can post on the agenda or in the chat. But maybe to kick off, does anyone want to give a quick update on decoupled blobs? And I think Gajinder, are you on the call? Yes, you had the PR up last Friday. Oh, sir. Okay, yeah, that's just updated the EIP basically to match Frida blobs, right?
Yep. So I have the PR up, and for Lodestar, I'm almost. I have patched up the entire flow, and I'm trying to make sure that I can run it locally, so I'm able to produce the blob, gossip it, sign it. So one confusion that I have right now is what is the exact signing flow that should be there, because there is a discussion going on the signing flow PR on the Beacon APIs, that whether the flow should be sticky or not, in terms of for a particular proposal when a validator is proposing. So in the current flow, we have signing of the blinded blob sidecar, which sort of binds the validator to a particular beacon node for a given proposal. And so there the confusion is whether we are going with that particular flow, or we are thinking of signing a full blob sidecar, which basically will enable validator to not to be binded to a particular beacon node.
Got it. Does anyone have thoughts on the signing flow?
Yes, we introduced the blinded flow just for supporting builder flow, actually. And then we realized that there is a nice side effect that we can reduce traffic between VC and BN by not sending an entire execution payload. And now this applies also to blobs. But the side effect of that is that when you don't send everything to the VC, then the VC needs to hit the same BN that has produced everything, which then in big deployments where you want to have maybe failover capabilities, you have that prevented. In a full builder flow where the block has been fully prepared by an external relayer, doesn't really apply, because then multiple BN will then end up interacting with the same relayer. But there are some weird situations where the BN decided to fall back on the local execution layer built block, and then you continuing the blinded flow, and you are forced to, in any case, to end up in the same beacon node, because this is the only one that has the local produced blocks. So a TLDR is that, do we want to have the opportunity to have remove stickiness between VC and BN, or we simply give up there, we don't care, and in the block production flow, we always assume that VC talks every time with the same BN.
I guess, yeah, does anyone have any other thoughts on this now, or does it make sense to just continue that conversation on the PR directly? It seems like it was recently active there as well.
I mean, the only thing I would say is like, Enrico sort of mentioned this, but this problem doesn't really exist if you are outsourcing the builder. It only exists in like a fallback scenario there. And since most people are using like an outsourced builder, and like long term, if we plan to have like a separation of block building versus production, then maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's like less of an issue to go with the blinded by default. But that's not to say I'm like, I feel super strongly about that, because I do like that validators, some of them currently don't outsource block building. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to like punish that.
Well, this doesn't preclude not outsourcing block building. This precludes if you don't outsource block building and you want to do load balancing failover on other beacon nodes, which, you know, that's one, a small subset, and two, it's not like a crazy requirement to have a beacon node that is producing the block be the one to broadcast the signatures. But I mean, I get that we're cutting out that design if we do this.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to hear about like any existing load balancing things that might have issues with this. Like, would this be an issue with like a testing or whatever vouch? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I think vouch is probably the primary design here that is using this.
Okay. And I guess, can we just get feedback from vouch on this?
Yeah, we should at least make Jim aware of it, because I know he didn't want to have the non-blinded blocks as well in the past.
Okay.
So for all intents and purposes, I'm assuming that we are going with the blinded sidecar signing flow.
Yeah, I think this makes sense to me.
Yeah. Another question I had on that PR was whether we want to, like, when we publish the signed blobs to the beacon node, do we want to publish them individually or as like a batch? I currently had it as like individual productions just because you can broadcast from right away, but I'm not sure if anyone has opinions on this.
So currently,
the counter would be,
sorry. Currently, I'm implementing as individual. So, I mean, I think individual is just fine.
individual is probably fine. I think the only thing that you gain by keeping them coupled here in this API is, you know, avoiding having to think about any sort of race conditions between the various things. You know, for example, if somebody wants to code that they're not broadcasting X unless they have Y already, you don't have that issue. Similarly, like you might want your VC, you know, if there are some sort of reputation issues you're worried about, like to only sign blobs that you have the block for, and so kind of like having these things coupled might make sense, but I don't feel very strongly here.
Yeah, another thing that I see here is that we do post for blobs and then we post the block. And when we post the block, the API return code 200 actually means that the beacon node has successfully imported the block, which also means that if you do everything in parallel, the block publishing to respect that needs to wait all the other blobs to be sent, and then the block import actually makes make through and can verify everything with the blobs and then import the block. It's kind of adding some extra interaction with these 3, 4, 5 potentially post to the bigger node.
Yeah, publishing them individually means we sort of have to change the meaning of like the 202 versus 204 error code, or sorry, response codes for import. Because 202 means like publish to gossip without importing to the beacon chain. And now we're essentially doing that for everything until we get like the 5th message. So that's like a quirk with publishing them individually.
So the way Lodestar is implementing it is that the validator basically makes sure that it has the block and the blobs before signing. But once it publishes it in parallel, the beacon node really does not wait to make sure that data availability checks passes while gossiping, but it sort of makes sure that all the block and blobs are available before importing it locally.
I guess one thing to clarify is that, are we just requesting blind blob sidecar to sign? If we are doing that, then we probably want to also change or update the consensus spec to specify that, right? Because the consensus spec for the honest validator still says that we're signing the full blob sidecar.
I don't think I would actually elevate that into the consensus spec. I mean, the validator doesn't know anything about like outsource building. The validator spec doesn't know anything about the separation of beacon node and validator client. And like by signing a blinded object, you're also signing the outer object. And you know, anytime a validator is signing a blinded object, you need to make sure that there's like adequate data there that it can do its safety checks, like for example the slot for any slashful message. But it seems like a leakage of the API and practical engineering considerations into the validator spec if we go that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do we have enough to try to hammer out this issue, this PR, before Thursday? Or do we need to chat about it more here?
I mean, it sounds like we can keep it how it is, I guess. The one thing I think is still weird is the response codes, but I think we can figure that out on the PR probably.
Okay. What would you say? So just real quick, the gain for doing split is that you can immediately start broadcasting when you get, and then when you get the blobs in the beacon node. Is that's the main reason that we want to do this?
Yeah.
Sidecar.
Yeah.
But we're also, if we're leaning into the blinded, you know, we're not actually transferring that much data between the two. So I'm not sure if that's like an appreciable gain.
Yeah.
But nonetheless.
I mean, I'm on board with combining them for the sake of simplicity if other people are also cool with that.
I think combining is a good idea.
Yeah, I guess I'm having trouble seeing what the complexity we're buying, like what we're buying with the complexity of separation, especially if they're blinded. But I'm not deep in it.
Yeah, I think as well that having them combined, if we go to the blinded, definitely simplify the handling of the API.
Okay, I can update that in the PR then.
Okay. I guess otherwise let's take it to your PR after you do the changes and try to get this done for either final discussion on Thursday or just merge by Thursday. Thanks for keeping that moving, Sean.
Okay. Next up, Roberto, you had a comment about SSZ. So there's been a couple breakout calls.
Before we move to SSZ,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's any other kind of like complexity like this around the decoupling that's worth discussing. I know it seems like not, but I'm just seeing if there's any other design stuff on decoupling that we're kind of lagging on.
I think there's one thing that I've seen discussed in some chats around like local heuristics on when you start requesting missing information. So like, say I got the block, which you might get the block before you get any blobs. You know, do you immediately request? Do you like wait some portion of the slot before you request? Because you expect in the normal case to just get them on gossip and not need to do direct requests. So I think those with like design consideration of like which heuristics you use under which conditions and at which points into the slot time to begin doing requests. Here, sorry, I got a baby yelling behind me. And so I don't think there's a right answer here, but it's just something for people to be considering. Maybe there's some other thoughts here, but that's the main other point of design that Vincent brought up.
But I also echo that that's also not like a blocker for the next DevNet. That's something that it will probably take us a while to figure out what's the perfect balance in terms of like when to request versus when to wait. So yeah, I mean, I think in the initial version, we're just gonna wait like patiently from the gossip, hoping we get it. And then if we don't get it, maybe just request once at the 2-second mark and just be done with it. But yeah, definitely for the final product, it will be a lot more thoughtful than that. So yeah.
Yeah, and this isn't something that would make it into the spec. These are like local design decisions. So I agree with you, Terrence. Yeah, this isn't a blocker.
Cool.
Does
that make sense, Jesse?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so it sounds like there's like guidance of waiting patiently and then requesting at the 2-second mark. Do we want to communicate that out to anyone now? At least for this initial phase.
I think everyone's kind of like has this as a known design consideration and that they're going to tune it over time, but I don't know where else we might want to write that down.
Yeah, and there is like the Telegram group on this as well. So yeah, it feels like conversation is happening about it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Anything else before SSZ?
Yeah, on the network, on the EL side for the transaction network container. So this is the PR that sorts of updates the aggregate proof to proofs. I mean, if someone wants to give it a review.
Okay. So that's the PR 6610.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, we have some thumbs up. Anything else on the blobs?
On the crypto library, maybe that is of interest.
Sure. Yes, please.
So I think right now, most bindings, I think all of the bindings support the new KZG verification interface. We are on the process of like polishing most bindings. I think there is very few remaining that haven't been that are not like fully there. I think Node needs a bit more tweaks. An interesting case is that the NIM bindings used to live outside of the KZG library for some reason, but now we're pulling them inside the library as well. So both to get equal treatment in terms of polishing, but also so that they are integrated into the audit scope. Right now there is another PR that slightly changes the cryptography interface on the consensus specs. It's not very, it's kind of minor. It just adds a few more helpings into the computation of KZG proofs. So it makes it easier basically for consumers of the API. And we want to update the KZG library for this new interface. And after that, we hope that we're going to start to ossify the code base and just do polishing improvements and adding test vectors. We have an audit in a month. So we hope that over the next 2 weeks, we can kind of finish all the major changes. And then for the last 2 weeks, kind of freeze the whole code base. So that's what's going on. There is still some work to be done on the binding. So if you work for a client team, there might be some more work to be done, but things are moving smoothly, I think.
Nice. Any other thoughts on the library?
I'm curious, are the Go bindings ready yet? Is anyone working on that?
So Kev is working. So, okay, when you say Go bindings, there is 2 ways to interpret this. Either you mean the Go library that is written based on Gnark, or you mean the CKZG Go bindings. I think both Go clients, both Prism and Geth, are going to use the Gnark based library that is Kev is writing. And I think it has been updated to the new API as of a few days ago, but I think Kev is not here to confirm this. But I'm pretty sure that it supports the new API. But maybe you want to ask on the KZG channel just to be sure about this.
Got it. Thanks.
Hello. Oh, yeah, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Hello, Kev.
Oh, hey. Yeah, so it supports the new API, not the one that's just about to be merged. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my iPhone. Not the one that's just about to be merged, which returns multiple things from compute KZG proof, but that's sort of a trivial change that we can push through. Cool.
There's a question by Alexi about SPDX headers.
I don't know what SPDX is. If that's a question for the KZG library.
Yeah.
No, it's just a general question about CKZG. If we, it's like common practice to input a line or two about license for the library. SPDX license is like a shortcut for such licenses.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry. Does anyone?
Yeah, let me rephrase. I mean, CKZG library code does not include license information in source codes, right?
Okay. And so an SPDX header adds the license information. Is that right?
Yeah. It's a 2-line comment which includes this information about what is license. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if CKCG doesn't have a software license, I don't remember it now. We should probably add something. I'm not sure if CPDX.
There's a license in the repo.
Okay, so SPDX is some sort of metadata to expose that somewhere or something.
Yeah, I can post an example in 4844 later.
Okay.
Okay, so there's no objections to adding this, it seems. Okay. Anything else on the library? Okay, so next up, so Roberto, you had a comment around SSZ. So there's been a couple calls already. We haven't quite landed on a final, I believe, design for SSZ, and whether or not we want to do more than just the 4844 changes as part of Cancun. It seems like there's some appetite by client devs to do that, but yeah, I don't know if, is there anyone here with a strong opinion about SSZ on the EL side?
Yeah, I don't know how many people have been following along. So we did a temperature check, I think early on whether we wanted to couple this with 4844, and there was kind of, I guess, some agreement that, yeah, we probably should because we're introducing a new transaction type, and if we don't couple it now, we're just going to introduce more technical debt. Hold on a second, my alarm's going off for some reason.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, but I think it's been about a month since that last temperature check, and we've been working out the details of what that change might look like, and I personally have been growing a bit worried because the complexity seems to keep exploding, and I don't know, the EIPs are pretty large and pretty messy. And I'm not sure they're done yet. So I don't know if anyone else has been watching them, but yeah, just wanted to sort of get people's feeling for that.
So I guess my feeling is I wouldn't change, like, in terms of like looking at like the next DevNets and implementations, I wouldn't want to make like significant changes to the transaction type unless we already agree, like unless we agree to a decision for SSZ before, right? So it probably makes sense to treat 4844 as like moving forward independently. And then if we do agree to make like a larger SSZ overhaul in Cancun that might affect 4844, but I assume it should be like a relatively contained change if we're just changing sort of the structure of the transaction. But I think trying to like keep both efforts in sync is probably the highest overhead and like least valuable thing. Like even if we decide to move to SSZ and like the 4844 implementations are a bit behind, we can then just take time to like bring this up to speed. Whereas it's like if the SSZ sort of proposal changes 2 or 3 times and we have to implement it 3 times, that seems like the worst outcome. And I don't know that like we have consensus today on what we want to do more broadly with regards to SSZ.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
It's definitely true. There's not consensus over the solution, right? We have the kind of single transaction version and then the multiple transaction version. I think it's still open over which one we'd go with.
I don't know if anyone disagrees with that, but yeah, I think we probably need a couple more weeks to like settle the SSZ discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I think that's fair. So just keep things decoupled for now, and if we decide to couple them, we'll pair it at that point. But anyway, if folks
Yeah.
haven't taken a look at that, I think it's worth forming an opinion on.
Yeah, so the type transaction channel is where it's happening in the Discord, and Ethan has a couple sort of documents that he shared throughout that show the different structure, and I don't know that he has run the. Oh yes, so he has run some he has run some benchmarks on the various designs. I just linked them here.
Yeah, Ethan's done a wonderful job. The docs he's created are top notch. So they're ready to be looked at.
Yeah. Okay. So that okay. I'll reach out to Ethan after this call, and I think this is probably sufficient to make a decision on like the next Alcor devs, but I'll check with him if there's anything that might be missing.
Great. Thanks.
Any other spec related topics that people wanted to bring out? Okay. If not, any client updates?
I had one more thing. I haven't heard it. We haven't talked about the transaction pool at all today. I'm just curious if anyone has an update on that or thoughts, status.
The ideas we discussed last time, I put them in the ETH Magicians thread. There wasn't much, I don't think there was any follow-up discussion, so I'm going to assume that means they're not controversial, and we can go ahead and add those. But yeah, I don't know if there's been any other talk.
Marius, I know the GEF team has thought a lot about the transaction pool. Anything on your side?
Marius?
No, not really. We've been very busy doing some refactors to the overall Geth code base, and so I don't think anyone has really looked into upcoming things yet.
Okay.
We're also working on together with Casey from Prism, we're working on a SSC code generation tool and library for generating SSC. And so yeah, this is kind of a focus for us to get those tools working as soon as possible, so that we can focus on other things. It's definitely like a priority for us, but as I said, we have a lot of other stuff. It's only for Go. Alexei.
Is it very bound to Go, or it may be like become cross-platform, cross-language?
In theory, it could be cross-platform, but we're not planning to do that.
That seems sense.
Okay. I guess this kind of moves us to client teams, but any other teams have updates they wanted to share?
Oh, in Nethermind, we didn't start works on transaction flow.
Sorry, is Ethan here today?
No, he's not.
That's unfortunate. So I've been looking at the 6404 test cases. One thing I noticed is that, so I'm kind of against the normalized type in general, but this is like a different discussion. What I would like to see is more specialized transaction types in the future. So for example, not all transaction types need to have the access list. not all transaction types need to be able to deploy contracts. And so having some test cases that kind of reflect that would be great, and this will, in my opinion, show that the SSC union is the kind of the preferred SSC encoding if we want to go that route. I'm not sure other people agree with going that route, but I think it would be very nice to have more specialized transactions and not require every transaction type to support everything.
What specific, just so we can close the loop on that, what specifically are you saying folks might not agree with? I'm just trying to figure out what the delta is between what Roberto posted and what you're saying here.
I don't know if people agree with the assumption that transaction types should be more, should be getting more specialized. Basically, we just added fields, and whenever we created a new transaction types, we included all of the previous fields. I'm not 100% sure what you're doing with the 4844 transactions, but the way I see it, it would be great to drop the create mechanism from 4844 transactions, drop the access list from 4844 transactions, and yeah, so basically drop the feature set that 4844 transactions can utilize.
But you still can run a execute contract code, right? And you need access list probably to make it cheaper. Or am I wrong?
Well, no, I don't think we need that. So basically these block transactions are for specific contracts, right? And access lists don't make anything cheaper. They just let you prepay for gas so that you can, it was introduced as a feature to unstuck contracts that we broke with gas cost increases. These roll-up contracts for the block transactions, they aren't deployed yet, so we cannot have, we didn't break them before, so I think it doesn't make sense to introduce this feature for these transactions. And so it would make everything, it would make the 4844 transactions way cheaper, way smaller, I think. And it's just it's a feature that no one will ever use. No one will ever send a 4844 transaction with an access list. So why should we have it? The same argument for no one will ever send a 4844 transactions and deploy a contract in the same transaction.
And you're saying that it's easier for clients to deal with more restrictions at the transaction type than to try and have the same sort of template across many transaction types, right? Where it's not a ton of overhead to add restrictions to 4844 transactions.
Yes.
Okay. And then Mofi is saying Optimism might deploy some contracts in 4844 transactions. But I guess the difference is is it a must-have versus something that could be, interesting to do if it was there? But I don't know, Mofi, would this be a blocker for Optimism if the flexibility of 444 transactions was reduced? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. there might not be agreement about this. This is just my thesis that I kind of like these restrictions, and I kind of like, like not porting over features from that have been kind of hacky in other transaction types.
And would you be, so say that we decided that like the 4844 transactions don't have access lists, but they can still deploy contracts. Is that still like a net benefit in your perspective? Or is it more like we need to really narrow down the scope as much as possible to get the benefit? Because otherwise you still can't like discriminate too much based on it.
It kind of depends on like which route you want to approach this problem from. I would rather say we're not doing anything, and every feature has to be like well argued for including it. Or we can say we're doing everything, and we have to argue each feature to remove it if we want it removed. Yeah. The thing is, like, we're going to save a couple of bytes, maybe 20 bytes at most if we do it this way, or 30 bytes at most. But if you think about 1 billion transactions, or I think we have like 1.5 or maybe 2 billion transactions on mainnet right now, this kind of adds up.
Okay, and I guess, yeah, I think we should try and bring this up on our core devs like next week, so that we can hopefully get to like a decision, like, because it feels like, yeah, there's this higher level design decision we need to take, and then everything else sort of flows from there. So if people can review that, and I'll post about it in the Discord as well, but if people can review that before, like, not the ACDC this week, but like the week after that's all core devs, I think it would be good if we could get on the same page by then. Anything else people wanted to discuss? And if not, I guess one question I would have is, so I understand, we're about to ship Shanghai, and teams are very focused on just getting that out right now. But I guess I'm curious what makes sense, in the next month or so, in terms of like milestones or things we want to do for 4844, considering that, like, getting Shanghai out on mainnet is the thing we're going to have to do in like the next 4 weeks or so.
So Shanghai is priority, so most of our teams are focusing on that. Besides that, I am just implementing free the blobs, decouple the blobs PR. So after that's done, I will try to launch a Prism local devnet to see how that goes. And once that's done, I will let people know. And hopefully by then we can maybe try the multi-client testnet. I guess the more client readiness by then, the better. Then once more clients ready, we can probably do devnet 5. So yeah, that's my take.
Anyone else have thoughts? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, for Lighthouse, we have like a few people working on 4844 even while we're doing the Capella stuff. So we still have a fair amount of work to do on the implementation before we have something working. But I think over the next month, like, yeah, our goal is to get something working and also work on a local devnet. And if that works, like, yeah, interop.
And so would it make Oh, from Deku. Oh, sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim. I was just gonna chime
Oh.
up for Nimbus. Similar. Well, I'm continuing to work on 4844, and I've been making progress on the decoupled blobs implementation. So I don't want to put a date, but it's coming along, and it all leads to a much nicer implementation as a side benefit. So I'm hopeful that sometime this month I'll be able to pair up, hopefully, with whoever else is ready.
So yeah, the same for Deco. We already started the decoupling PR. There have been also other type of work that we had to do internally. So we are not currently on full speed there, but we are planning to get back on the decoupling. And yeah, it makes sense to us to have something by the end of the month to start playing with other clients. Yeah, it sounds reasonable for us too.
So I guess if that's roughly the spot people are in, and as we're like shifting, more of our focus away from Shanghai as it's going to be done, does it make sense to move these calls to maybe like bi-weekly, and we can check in like 2 weeks from now where the implementations are? If we feel like we're ready to like put a multi-client DevNet together, then we can do that in 2 weeks. If not, then I think if we were to put it together more like, a month from now, then we can also make sure that it's built off like the Chapella releases. So like that, we can kind of basically go from like this being a 4844 DevNet to maybe like the first Dencun multi-client DevNet or something like that. Yeah, does that generally make sense to people? It seems like over time, this is basically going to become, the main focus of the all-core devs calls. So like, I want to make sure we're not just, taking up people's time for no reason. Okay, then yeah, I guess in that case, I'll move the meetings to bi-weekly. Make sure that we cover the SSD topic on the next ACDE, which is in like 10 days. So that should hopefully give people enough time to review things. And then 2 weeks from today, we can meet together, check where the implementations are at, how Shanghai is going, and kind of decide on whether we want to move to a multi-client testnet or wait another 2 weeks to do that. And I think there's a decent chance like this DevNet 5 might just be the first like Dencun DevNet. And obviously, we still have the Discord, and we don't have to block progress on these calls, but I think it's still valuable to have them maybe just a bit more spaced out. Sweet. Anything else anyone wanted to cover before we wrap up? Okay, and it seems like we might have a Lodestar Nethermind DevNet being stood up in the next week or so. Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone. Talk to you soon, and I'll update the calendar invites to make this bi-weekly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.